During my lifetime, I have dedicated myself to the struggle of the African people. I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society in which all persons live together in harmony and with equal opportunities. It is an ideal which I hope to live for and to achieve, but if need be, it is an ideal for which I am prepared to die. Nelson Mandela could arguably be described as one of the most resilient, adored, and respected world leaders of the last century. He was the epitome of a civil rights struggle in Africa, much like Martin Luther King Jr. in the United States of America. He embodied equality and respect, and his message still holds true to his legacy even after his death. He made it his life's work to preach against intolerance on both sides, and made it his duty to speak out for the oppressed and misunderstood. His journey to power in South Africa was one of triumph and heartbreak, power and peace. He was a martyr for armistice and democracy, and his journey is a remarkable story of one of the most influential people, not only in Africa, but the entire world. Rolihlahla Nelson Mandela was born July 18, 1918, in a small village named Maveso on the outer banks of the Mbobashi River of Transkei, South Africa. His name, Rolihlahla, means pulling the branch of a tree, which many people of the tribe translated as troublemaker. Mandela's father, Gadla Henry Mafakaniswa, chief of the Maveso tribe, served as a counselor to tribal chiefs before disputes with local magistrates cost him his title and fortune, forcing the family to move to Kiunu, north of Maveso. Baptized in a Methodist church, Mandela would be the first in his family that attended school. It was there that Mandela was given a more modernized English name, Nelson. At a tender young age of 9 years old, Nelson's father passed away unexpectedly due to lung disease. He would later be adopted by Chief Dalanyebo of the Tembu tribe out of favor for his father. It was here where Mandela would be exposed to a more sophisticated life and have access to resources unavailable to him in his early childhood. It was during his many lessons of history that Nelson learned that his people lived in peace until they were completely infiltrated by white people. An early interest in law would take Mandela on a more tempestuous path than what was expected of him. His need for revolt called for his removal from the university at which he was studying and would carry him away from the planned marriage that was set forth for him by the paramount chief of Tembu. This university boycott is the first record of Mandela's political activism. Mandela, with his rebellious nature, would ultimately leave everything behind for Johannesburg, which would be the beginning of a series of unfortunate events in his life. It was while he was living in Johannesburg that he met Walter Sisulu, a political activist who would become not only his guide in the political landscape of Africa, but introduce him to his first wife, Evelyn. It wouldn't be long before Mandela would find himself studying law at the University of Witwatersrand, and also entering into an organization that would be the beginning of a string of events that would not only change Mandela's life forever, but also the political landscape of Africa for many decades to come. Through his political contacts, Nelson became involved in the anti-apartheid movement, a movement in Africa that was a system of segregation or discrimination on the grounds of race. He joined the African National Congress in 1942 and created a subgroup named the ANC Youth League with other activists. The group sought to give a voice to oppressed people and sought to end the apartheid movement. This young group of Africans believed that the ANC's strategies were not seeing the results that they had envisioned and sought to order strikes against the current government, as well as tactics that would later be seen by the government as terrorism. The Defiance Campaign, a resistance campaign led by Mandela and his cohorts that sought to defy unjust laws in Africa, was met with resistance and mass arrest. Over 150 were charged with treason for their role in the Defiance Campaign, and ultimately acquitted 4 years later. In a series of events from 1961 to 1963, including a 3-day national worker strike, Mandela and many other leaders were given life sentences for a host of political infractions, including treason and sabotage, and were sent to Robben Island to serve out their sentences. It was at his trial that Mandela gave one of the most prominent speeches of his political career. I am the first accused. I hold a bachelor's degree in arts and practiced as an attorney here in Johannesburg for a number of years in partnership with Oliver Tambo. I'm a convicted prisoner, serving 5 years for leaving the country without a permit and for inciting people to go on strike at the end of May 1961. In my youth in the Transkei, I listened to the elders of my tribe telling stories of the old days. Amongst the tales they related to me were those of wars fought by our ancestors in defense of the fatherland. I hoped then that life might offer me the opportunity to serve my people and make my own humble contribution to their freedom struggle. This is what had motivated me in all that I have done in relation to the charges made against me in this case. Having said this, I must deal immediately and at some length with the question of violence. Some of the things so far told to the court are true, and some are untrue. I do not, however, deny that I planned sabotage. I did not plan it in a spirit of recklessness, nor because I have any love of violence. I planned it as a result of a calm and sober assessment of the political situation that had arisen after many years of tyranny, exploitation, and oppression of my people by the whites. As a Robben Island detainee, Mandela's living situation was dire. He contracted tuberculosis and was treated very poorly by prison workers. It was while incarcerated that he would finish his degree from the University of London correspondence program, and that Mandela would see his cause continue to gain momentum. Revolution after revolution that would ultimately be contained by authorities gave Mandela faith that not all hope was lost in his struggle. As Mandela's political clout grew as a symbol of resistance over the 27 years of his prison sentence, the international community took notice. A political movement grew out of support for Mandela and his struggle to end apartheid in his country, and President P.W. Botha took notice. A series of talks between Mandela and the president-elect would lead to a stalemate over his release, due to Botha's demands that Mandela renounce violence. The stalemate ended when the former president fell ill to a stroke and was replaced with a new president, Frederick Willem de Klerk, who would ultimately unban the ANC and release Mandela from prison in 1990 without any stipulations attached. The camera started clicking like a great herd of metallic beasts. I raised my right fist, and there was a roar. I had not been able to do that for 27 years, and it gave me a surge of strength and joy. Nelson Mandela on his release from prison. After 27 years of incarceration, Nelson Mandela emerged from his cell into a world that was different from what he had known prior to being sentenced to life imprisonment. His calm manner and tough existence would exemplify his style of leadership upon his exodus from prison. He was elected president of the ANC in 1991 and would enter negotiations with President de Klerk on the matter of race relations in South Africa. Mandela and de Klerk clashed from the beginning. However, they both understood that to end apartheid, they needed each other's support. Directly following Mandela's release, violence throughout the nation threatened to create a civil war, which would have ended peaceful negotiations. These two leaders united the nation through their leadership. In 1993, Nelson Mandela, in concert with de Klerk, was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize for their work in the undoing of apartheid. Mandela saw South Africa's first democratic elections held in the spring of 1994, and in that same year, at the golden age of 77, he became South Africa's first black president. We shall build a society in which all South Africans, both black and white, will be able to walk tall without any fear in their hearts, assured of the inalienable rights to human dignity, a rainbow nation at peace with itself and the world. Mandela's speech at his inauguration. Mandela would later go on to publish an autobiography, Long Walk to Freedom, which detailed his life and imprisonment up to his freedom and release, which he wrote the majority of during his long incarceration on Robben Island. In a long list of accomplishments before his retirement, Mandela would go on to not only earn the Order of Merit, an honorary order given to distinguished service in the armed forces, science, art, or the promotion of culture, he would also help save his country from financial collapse, create jobs for South Africans, as well as provide health care and housing for those who lived in poverty. Mandela retired from active politics by the 1999 general election. He stayed busy raising money for schools and clinics in South Africa. His foundation, the Nelson Mandela Foundation, was a big focus of his during this time. Mandela was also a key mediator in Burundi's civil war, as well as the Democratic Republic of Congo, which shows the respect he was given by all the people in Africa. Like slavery and apartheid, poverty is not natural. It is man-made, and it can be overcome and eradicated by the actions of human beings. And overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. It is the protection of a fundamental human right, the right to dignity and a decent life. He also published the books No Easy Walk to Freedom, Nelson Mandela, The Struggle is My Life, and Nelson Mandela's favorite African folktales. In 2001, Mandela was diagnosed and treated for prostate cancer, and by 2004, at age 85, he had publicly announced his formal retirement from public life. In 2007, Mandela joined a group called the Elders. This group was formed with well-known leaders from across the globe who all aimed at fixing issues both publicly and privately. After the death of his son Magatho in 2005, Nelson had been committed to the fight against AIDS, which killed his son. This is a war. It has killed more people than has been the case in all previous wars and in all previous natural disasters, Mandela said. We must not continue to be debating, to be arguing when people are dying. Mandela speaking on AIDS. Mandela made his last public appearance in 2010 at the final match of the World Cup in South Africa. He remained largely out of the spotlight in his later years, choosing to spend much of his time in his childhood community of Kiunu, south of Johannesburg. December 5, 2013, Nelson Mandela passed away at the age of 93 while at his South African home with his family by his side.